It was a crisp, sunny morning outside the royal palace. The air felt fresh, like when you open a window after a long night. The sun was shining bright, making everything look happy and alive. Little birds chirped in the trees, hopping from branch to branch like they were playing a game. Big, colorful flags waved high above the palace, flapping in the wind, red, blue, and gold, all dancing together. It was the kind of day where you'd think nothing could go wrong. Everything seemed perfect, like a picture in a storybook. The royal palace stood tall and fancy, with huge stone walls and shiny windows that sparkled in the sunlight. It was a place where kings and queens used to live, and now it was a spot where people came to visit and take pictures. Tourists walked around with big smiles, pointing at the pretty flowers in the garden and snapping photos with their cameras. Kids ran around, laughing and chasing each other, while their parents tried to keep up. Everyone was having fun, enjoying the beautiful day. And then there were the royal guards. They stood super still, like statues, right in front of the palace gates. They wore bright red uniforms with gold buttons that shined like little suns. Their hats were tall and black, sitting perfectly on their heads. Each guard held a long stick called a rifle, but it wasn't loaded, it was just for show. They looked strong and serious, like nothing could scare them. People loved watching them because they never moved, not even a little. It was like a game to see if anyone could make them smile or blink, but they never did. Among those guards was a guy named Tommy Briggs. Tommy was young, maybe 20 years old, with short brown hair and bright green eyes. He'd only been a guard for 6 months, which isn't very long. Most of the other guards had been there for years and years, but Tommy was new. He stood just like the others, tall and straight, with his red uniform buttoned up tight. His face was calm, and he didn't say much. If you looked at him, you'd think he was just another guard doing his job. Nothing special, right? That's what everyone thought, anyway. See, Tommy was quiet. He didn't talk a lot or make big jokes like some of the other guards did when they were off duty. He was polite, always saying yes, sir, or no, ma'am when someone gave him an order. He followed the rules perfectly, standing still for hours without complaining. The older guards liked him because he didn't cause trouble. They'd say stuff like, "That Tommy's a good kid. Doesn't talk much, but he does what he's told." The visitors didn't pay him much attention either. To them, he was just one more guard in a red coat, part of the scenery. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets interesting: no one knew who Tommy really was. Not the other guards, not the tourists, not even the boss who hired him. Tommy had a secret. A big, giant, amazing secret. It wasn't something small, like he forgot to feed his goldfish once. No, this was a secret so huge it could change everything. And on this perfect, sunny morning, that secret was about to come out. It was going to turn this normal day into something wild, something no one would ever forget. What kind of secret, you ask? Well, I can't tell you everything just yet. That would ruin the fun. But let's just say Tommy wasn't exactly what he seemed. On the outside, he looked like a regular guy, a rookie guard who was still learning the job. But inside? Oh, inside there was a whole different story. A story full of surprises, danger, and maybe even a little bravery. And the best part? Nobody saw it coming. Not one single person. Picture this: the palace gates were wide open, and a big crowd was gathering. Families with kids, old people with walking sticks, and even a group of school kids on a field trip, all buzzing around like bees in a hive. The sun kept shining, making the red uniforms glow even brighter. Tommy stood there, same as always, watching the people go by. His green eyes moved just a tiny bit, looking at everything but not showing what he was thinking. He was good at that, keeping his thoughts hidden. A little girl with pigtails ran up to him, holding a lollipop. She waved it in front of his face and giggled. "Hey, Mr. Guard. Want some candy?" she asked. Tommy didn't move. He didn't even blink. The girl's dad scooped her up, laughing. "Sorry about that," he said. "She thinks you're a robot." The crowd chuckled, and Tommy stayed still, like he didn't hear a thing. But deep down, he heard it all. He noticed everything. That's part of what made him different. The other guards didn't think much of Tommy. To them, he was just the new guy. They'd tease him sometimes, but not in a mean way. "Hey, Briggs," one of them might say, "don't fall asleep out there, And Tommy would just nod, keeping his mouth shut. They figured he was shy or maybe a little boring. He's a rookie, they'd say. He'll toughen up someday. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Tommy wasn't shy or boring at all. He was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the day got warmer. More people showed up, filling the courtyard with noise. Cameras clicked, kids shouted, and the birds kept singing their happy little songs. It was loud and busy, but Tommy didn't mind. He liked watching the world go by. He liked seeing how people acted when they thought no one was paying attention. It was all part of his secret, you see. He was always watching, always ready. Now, let's talk about the palace for a second. It wasn't just any old building. It was huge, like, bigger than 10 houses put together. The walls were made of gray stone, stacked up so high you'd get dizzy looking at the top. There were towers on each corner, with pointy roofs that looked like wizard hats. The windows were tall and skinny, with glass that sparkled like diamonds. Inside, people said it was full of gold and treasures, stuff left behind by kings and queens from long ago. That's why so many visitors came. They wanted to see the fancy rooms and imagine what it was like to live there. The guards were a big part of the show, too. They weren't just there to look pretty, though. Their job was to keep the palace safe. Years ago, they used to protect the royal family from bad guys. Now, they mostly kept an eye on the tourists, making sure no one climbed the fences or snuck inside where they weren't supposed to go. It was an important job, even if it didn't seem exciting most days. And Tommy? He took it seriously. Really seriously. But here's where it gets good. That morning, while the birds chirped and the flags waved, something was brewing. Something big. Tommy didn't know it yet, or maybe he did, and he was just pretending not to, but things were about to change. Across the street from the palace, hidden in the shadows, someone was watching him. Someone who didn't belong there. Someone who had their own plans. And those plans? They were going to crash right into Tommy's secret. Imagine a regular day turning into an adventure. That's what was coming. The palace, the guards, the happy crowd, none of them were ready for it. But Tommy? He was different. He wasn't just standing there because he had to. He was standing there because he chose to. And that choice, that secret he kept locked up inside, was about to burst out like a firework on the 4th of July. Let's paint the picture a little more. The courtyard was full of action. A guy with a big hat sold balloons, red ones, blue ones, yellow ones, floating high above the crowd. A lady with a stroller pushed her baby past Tommy, humming a little song. 2 boys kicked a soccer ball back and forth, dodging between people's legs. It was busy and loud, but it felt safe. Everyone was smiling, enjoying the perfect day. The guards stood like rocks in a river, letting the crowd flow around them. Tommy's spot was right by the main gate. It was a big iron gate, painted black, with sharp points on top to keep climbers out. Behind it, you could see the palace doors, huge wooden ones with carvings of lions and crowns. Tommy liked that spot. It gave him a good view of everything, the street, the crowd, the other guards. He could see who was coming and going. And that morning, he saw a lot. The clock on the palace tower said it was almost noon. The sun was hot now, and some of the tourists fanned themselves with maps. A few guards wiped sweat off their foreheads, but not Tommy. He stood cool and calm, like the heat didn't bother him. His red uniform was still perfect, not a wrinkle on it. That's how he was, always neat, always in control. At least, that's what people saw. But inside Tommy's head? That's where the real stuff was happening. He wasn't just thinking about lunch or how long his shift was. No, he was thinking about his secret. He didn't let it show, not a twitch, not a smile, but it was there, buzzing like a bee in a jar. What was it? Was he a spy? A hero? Maybe something even crazier? I won't spill it yet, but trust me, it's worth waiting for. Let's zoom out for a minute. Picture the whole scene, the giant palace with its towers and flags, the noisy crowd full of happy faces, the guards in their red coats standing tall. And right in the middle of it all, there's Tommy Briggs. Just a young guy, 6 months on the job, looking like nothing special. But looks can trick you. They can hide the truth. And the truth about Tommy was bigger than anyone could guess. The day kept rolling along. A band started playing music near the fountain, trumpets and drums, loud and cheerful. People clapped and danced a little, making the courtyard even livelier. The smell of hot dogs and pretzels floated through the air from a food cart nearby. Kids begged their parents for ice cream, and the line at the cart got longer. It was a party now, a big, happy party under the sunny sky. Tommy watched it all. His eyes moved slow and careful, like a cat watching a mouse. He saw the band, the food cart, the kids with their sticky hands. He saw the other guards chatting when no one was looking. He saw the tourists taking selfies with the palace in the background. And he saw something else, something tiny, something easy to miss. A shadow moved across the street. A figure stepped behind a tree, then peeked out again. Most people wouldn't notice. But Tommy did. Who was that? Why were they hiding? Tommy didn't turn his head. He didn't give anything away. He just kept standing there, still as a statue, while his brain worked fast. Was this part of his secret? Did he know something was coming? Maybe. Maybe not. But one thing was sure, this perfect day wasn't going to stay perfect for long. The birds kept chirping, the flags kept waving, and the crowd kept laughing. But under all that noise, something was building. Something exciting. Something dangerous. Tommy Briggs, the quiet rookie guard, was right at the center of it. And his secret? It was like a present waiting to be unwrapped, a present that would make jaws drop and eyes go wide. So, what do you think? Was Tommy ready for what was coming? Did he know more than he let on? Stick around, because this ordinary morning is about to turn into something no one will ever forget. The sun's still shining, the palace is still standing, but Tommy's secret? It's about to change everything. Across the street from the palace, a scruffy-looking guy named Eddie Malone stood in the shadows. He wasn't tall or big, but he had a wild look about him, like a fox that's been running from dogs too long. His hair was messy, sticking up in all directions, and his clothes were dirty, like he hadn't washed them in weeks. His jacket was torn at the sleeve, and his jeans had holes at the knees. Eddie's eyes were sharp and sneaky, darting around like he was looking for something or someone. He wasn't just standing there for fun. Oh no, Eddie had a plan. A big, dangerous plan. Eddie wasn't some random guy who liked causing trouble. He was way more than that. He was a wanted fugitive. That means the police were after him, and not just for something small like stealing candy. Eddie had been on the run for months, hiding in dark alleys, sleeping in old buildings, always looking over his shoulder. People in the town whispered about him when they thought no one was listening. That Eddie's dangerous, they'd say, their voices low. Robbed a bank, they say. Maybe worse. Some said he took a whole bag of money from the bank downtown. Others thought he might have hurt someone to get away. No one knew the whole story, but everyone agreed, Eddie Malone was bad news. The cops were getting closer every day. Eddie could feel it. He'd seen their cars driving slow through the streets at night, their lights flashing red and blue. He'd heard their radios crackling with voices saying his name, Eddie Malone, wanted for robbery. Do not approach. Call for backup. They were hunting him like a pack of wolves, and Eddie was running out of places to hide. His heart beat fast all the time now, thumping in his chest like a drum. He was desperate. Really desperate. He needed a way out, and he needed it fast. That's when he saw the palace across the street. It was big and fancy, with its tall towers and waving flags. The crowd was busy, full of happy people taking pictures and eating ice cream. And there, right in front of the gates, were the royal guards. They stood super still, like toy soldiers in their bright red coats. Eddie watched them with those sneaky eyes of his. He didn't care about the palace or the tourists. He cared about the guards, or one guard, at least. One guard who looked like an easy target. That guard was Tommy Briggs. Tommy stood stiff and proud at his post, right by the big black gate. His red uniform was perfect, not a button out of place. His face was calm, like he didn't have a worry in the world. Eddie leaned against a tree across the street, watching Tommy through the crowd. He smirked, showing his crooked teeth. Perfect, he muttered to himself, his voice low and rough. Just some kid playing soldier. He won't even see me coming. Eddie thought Tommy looked young and new, like someone who didn't know much about danger. A rookie, that's what he called him in his head. An easy mark. But here's the thing, Eddie didn't know it yet, but he just picked the worst guy to mess with. Tommy wasn't what he seemed. Not even close. Eddie thought he was smart, picking out the quiet guard who didn't talk much. He thought he'd found someone weak, someone he could scare or trick. But Eddie was wrong. So wrong. And soon, he was going to find out just how big a mistake he'd made. Let's back up a little and see what Eddie was thinking. He'd been hiding near the palace for a couple of days now, watching everything. He'd seen the guards change shifts, marching in and out like clockwork. He'd seen the tourists come and go, filling the courtyard with noise. He'd even seen the food carts roll in, selling hot dogs and popcorn to hungry kids. Eddie didn't care about any of that stuff. He was looking for a way to escape. A way to get past the cops and disappear for good. The palace was his chance, or so he thought. It was big and busy, the kind of place where he could blend in with the crowd. Maybe he could sneak inside, hide in one of those fancy rooms with the gold chairs and big paintings. Or maybe he could cause some trouble out front, something big enough to make everyone run around like crazy. Then, while they were all confused, he'd slip away. That was Eddie's style, making a mess and running while no one was looking. But he couldn't just walk up to the palace gates. The guards were there, and they'd stop him. Eddie wasn't dumb. He knew he looked suspicious with his messy hair and torn clothes. The guards would spot him right away and ask questions. And if the cops showed up? Game over. No, Eddie needed a plan. A tricky one. Something to get him past those guards without a fight, at least, not a big one. That's when he zeroed in on Tommy. Eddie watched him for a while, squinting across the street. Tommy didn't move much. He just stood there, holding his rifle, staring straight ahead. The other guards were older, tougher looking, with hard faces and loud voices when they talked to each other. But Tommy? He was different. He was young, quiet, and small compared to the others. Eddie rubbed his hands together, grinning. This kid's my ticket, he thought. He's new. Probably scared of his own shadow. I'll shake him up, and he'll let me through. Eddie didn't have a lot of time to waste. The sun was high now, and the courtyard was packed. He could hear kids laughing and a band playing music somewhere nearby. The noise was good, it would cover up whatever he did. But he could also hear sirens in the distance, faint but getting closer. The cops weren't giving up. They were out there, searching the streets, asking people if they'd seen a guy like him. Eddie's stomach twisted. He had to move. Now or never. So, what would you do if you were Eddie? Cornered, out of options, with the police closing in? Would you run? Hide? Or would you try something crazy, like messing with the royal guard? Eddie picked crazy. He always picked crazy. It's what got him in trouble in the first place, and now it was all he had left. Eddie reached into his jacket pocket and felt something cold and heavy. It was a gun. Not a big one, just a little pistol he'd stolen a while back. He didn't like using it, not because he was nice, but because it made too much noise. Noise brought attention, and attention brought cops. But today, he didn't care about noise. He needed a way out, and that gun was his key. He'd use it to scare the kid Tommy and make him back off. Then Eddie would run through the gate and figure out the rest later. He took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the tree. The crowd didn't notice him at first. He kept his head down, pulling his jacket tight around him. His sneakers scuffed the pavement as he moved closer to the palace. The guards were still in their spots, standing like statues. Tommy was right there, just a few steps away now. Eddie's heart pounded faster. His hand gripped the gun tighter. This was it. His big move. Across from him, Tommy stood still. The sun shined on his red coat, making it glow. His green eyes looked out over the crowd, calm and steady. If he saw Eddie coming, he didn't show it. He didn't turn his head or blink. He just stood there, like nothing was wrong. Eddie smirked again. Too easy, he whispered to himself. This kid's got no idea what's about to hit him. But let's think about that for a second. Was Eddie right? Was Tommy really just some scared kid playing soldier? Or was there more to him, something Eddie couldn't see? See, Eddie was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. He was so busy running from the cops that he didn't stop to wonder about Tommy. He didn't ask why a rookie guard looked so calm, or why his eyes seemed to catch everything. Eddie thought he was the hunter. He didn't know he might be the one getting caught. The courtyard was loud now. The band played a fast song, and people clapped along. Kids ran around with balloons, their voices high and happy. A lady sold flowers near the gate, calling out, "Roses. Daisies. Get your flowers here." It was all so normal, so cheerful. But Eddie didn't fit in. He was a dark spot in the bright day, moving closer and closer to Tommy. Eddie stopped just a few feet away. He stood behind a group of tourists snapping pictures, blending in for a moment. He peeked out, watching Tommy. The guard didn't move. His hand stayed on his rifle, his back straight. Eddie's smirk grew wider. He's clueless, he thought. This is gonna be a piece of cake. He slid his hand out of his pocket, keeping the gun hidden under his jacket. Not yet. He'd wait for the right second. The sirens in the distance got louder. Eddie's head jerked toward the sound, his eyes narrowing. The cops were close, too close. He couldn't wait anymore. He had to act. He took one more step, pushing past a guy with a camera. Now he was right in front of Tommy, close enough to see the gold buttons on his coat. Eddie's breath was fast and shaky. His plan was simple: scare the kid, make him freeze, then run. But something felt off. Tommy's eyes moved just a tiny bit and locked onto Eddie. It was quick, so quick most people wouldn't notice. But Eddie did. For a second, his smirk faded. What's with this guy, he thought. Why's he looking at me like that? Tommy's face didn't change. He didn't smile or frown. He just stared, like he knew something Eddie didn't. Eddie shook it off. Nah, he told himself. He's just a kid. Probably scared already. He straightened up, puffing out his chest a little. He had the gun. He had the power. Tommy was nothing, just a rookie in a fancy coat. Eddie was sure of it. Or at least, he tried to be sure. The tension was building, like a storm about to break. Eddie was ready to make his move. Tommy was ready for something. The crowd kept buzzing, the sirens kept wailing, and the palace stood tall behind them. Two guys, one moment, and a whole lot of trouble coming fast. What would happen next? Who would win, Eddie with his sneaky plan, or Tommy with his quiet calm? Let's see how this plays out. Eddie thought he had it all figured out. He thought Tommy was an easy target. But maybe, just maybe, he was about to learn a hard lesson. The kind of lesson you don't forget. Stick around, because this is where the real fun starts. Eddie Malone was on the move. He slipped through the crowd like a snake sliding through grass. His dirty jacket hung loose around him, and his hand was tucked under it, hiding something. That something was a gun, a small, cold, metal thing he'd kept secret until now. He didn't want anyone to see it yet. Not the tourists, not the guards, not even the birds chirping in the trees. Eddie had a plan, and that gun was a big part of it. He was getting closer and closer to Tommy Briggs, the young guard in the bright red coat. Eddie's heart was pounding like a drum, boom, 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 loud in his ears. He was nervous, but he didn't show it. He couldn't. Not yet. The courtyard in front of the palace was full of people. Tourists walked around with big cameras, snapping pictures of the tall towers and the waving flags. Kids ran past with balloons, laughing and shouting. A lady pushed a stroller, and a guy with a funny hat sold ice cream from a cart. Everyone was busy, everyone was happy. The sun was shining bright, making the day feel warm and cheerful. No one noticed Eddie weaving through them. He kept his head down, his messy hair falling over his eyes. He looked like just another guy in the crowd, except he wasn't. He was a fugitive, a bad guy on the run, and he was up to no good. Eddie's sneakers scuffed the ground as he moved. He dodged a little boy chasing a ball, then ducked behind a lady with a big bag. Step by step, he got nearer to Tommy. The guard stood at his post by the black iron gate, stiff and still like a statue. His red uniform glowed in the sunlight, and his tall black hat sat straight on his head. Tommy didn't look around much. He just stared ahead, holding his rifle tight. To Eddie, he seemed like an easy target, just a kid doing a job, nothing more. But Eddie was about to find out there was more to Tommy than he thought. The crowd kept buzzing. Cameras clicked, kids giggled, and the band near the fountain played a happy tune with trumpets and drums. It was loud, really loud, and that was perfect for Eddie. The noise would hide what he was about to do. He could feel the gun under his jacket, heavy against his side. It made him feel strong, like he was in charge. He told himself, this kid won't know what hit him. I'll scare him, and he'll let me pass the gate. Easy. That's what Eddie wanted, to get through the palace gates and disappear before the cops caught up to him. Eddie was close now. Really close. He could see Tommy's face, calm, with bright green eyes that didn't blink. The guard's hands were steady on his rifle, not shaking at all. Eddie's heart beat even faster. He was just a few steps away, hidden behind a group of tourists taking selfies. He peeked out, watching Tommy carefully. The guard didn't move. He didn't turn his head or twitch. But then something happened. Tommy's eyes flicked toward Eddie. Just for a second, so quick it was like a flash of lightning. Most people would have missed it. The tourists didn't see. The other guards didn't notice. But Eddie? He caught it. Eddie froze for a moment. His sneaky smirk faded a little. He's sharper than he looks, he thought, his brain spinning. That tiny flick of Tommy's eyes, it wasn't much, but it was enough to make Eddie wonder. Was this kid really as clueless as he seemed? Did he know Eddie was there, sneaking up on him? Eddie's hand tightened on the gun under his jacket. His fingers squeezed the metal, feeling its cold weight. Not, he told himself, shaking off the worry. He's just a rookie. Probably saw a bird or something. He's not onto me. Eddie wanted to believe that. He had to believe that. His plan depended on it. But that little eye flick stuck in Eddie's head. It was like a splinter he couldn't pull out. He took another step, pushing past a guy with a big camera. Now he was almost there, just a couple of feet from Tommy. The guard still didn't move. His face was like a mask, showing nothing. Eddie's heart kept thumping, loud and fast. He could hear the sirens in the distance now, those cop cars getting closer. Time was running out. He had to do this. He had to make his move. The crowd was perfect cover. People bumped into each other, laughing and talking. A kid dropped his ice cream and started crying. A lady shouted, "Over here, take my picture." No one paid attention to Eddie. He was invisible, just a shadow slipping through. He liked it that way. It made him feel smart, like he was winning a game. He looked at Tommy again. The guard's red coat stood out bright against the gray stone of the palace. His black hat cast a little shadow over his face. Eddie grinned to himself. This kid's toast, he thought. He's got no clue. And then it happened. Fast like a snap of your fingers. Eddie made his move. He stepped right up to Tommy, so close he could smell the guard's coat. In one quick jerk, he pulled the gun out from under his jacket. The metal flashed in the sunlight, small but scary. Eddie held it low, pointing it at Tommy's chest. His voice came out rough and mean, like a growl. "Don't move, kid," he hissed, "or you're done." His words were sharp, meant to scare. He wanted Tommy to shake, to cry, to back off. The crowd saw it. Oh boy, did they see it? People gasped, their mouths dropping open. A lady screamed, loud and high. "He's got a gun," someone yelled. Tourists scattered like ants when you kick their heel. They ran in every direction, tripping over each other, dropping cameras and bags. Kids hid behind their parents, peeking out with wide eyes. The band stopped playing, the trumpets cutting off with a weird honk. The whole courtyard turned into a mess, shouts, cries, footsteps pounding the ground. It was chaos, just like Eddie wanted. But Tommy? Tommy didn't flinch. Not even a little. He didn't jump back or drop his rifle. He didn't yell or shake. He just stood there, still as a rock. His green eyes locked onto Eddie's, steady and cool. Eddie blinked, surprised. This wasn't right. The kid was supposed to be scared. He was supposed to beg or run. But Tommy didn't. Instead, he stared Eddie down, like he wasn't afraid at all. His face was calm, too calm. It made Eddie's skin crawl, like ants were marching up his back. Then Tommy spoke. His voice was low and steady, not loud or shaky. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. It wasn't a yell or a cry. It was quiet, almost soft, but it hit Eddie like a punch. Those words, they weren't what Eddie expected. They weren't scared words. They were strong words, brave words. Eddie's hand wobbled just a tiny bit, the gun shaking in his grip. What's wrong with this guy, he thought. Why isn't he freaking out? The crowd was still running, screaming, hiding behind benches and trees. The other guards turned their heads, finally noticing something was up. One of them shouted, "Hey, what's going on over there?" But they were too far away to help yet. It was just Eddie and Tommy now, face to face, with the gun between them. Eddie's heart raced even faster. His plan was falling apart. This kid, this stupid rookie, wasn't acting like a rookie at all. Eddie tried to stay tough. "Shut up," he snapped, pushing the gun closer. "You don't talk. You move, or I shoot." His voice was loud now, angry. He wanted to scare Tommy, to take control again. But Tommy didn't budge. His eyes stayed on Eddie, sharp and clear. That calm, it was creepy. It made Eddie feel small, like he wasn't the one in charge anymore. What's he up to? Eddie wondered. Why isn't he scared? Let's think about that. Most people, if you point a gun at them, they'd panic. They'd yell or cry or try to run. But not Tommy. He just stood there, cool as ice. Was he crazy? Was he brave? Or was there something else, something Eddie didn't know? Wait, what was Tommy hiding? Why was he so calm when a gun was right in his face? Keep watching, because this is where things get wild. Eddie's mind was spinning. He didn't like this. He didn't like Tommy's eyes or his voice or that weird, steady stare. It made him feel off, like he'd stepped into a trap he couldn't see. Move. Eddie barked again, waving the gun. Get out of my way. He wanted to run past the gate, into the palace, away from the cops. But Tommy didn't step aside. He didn't even twitch. He just kept looking at Eddie, like he was waiting for something. The sirens were louder now, way louder. Eddie could hear them over the crowd's screams. The cops were close, maybe just a street away. His time was almost up. He had to get past Tommy, and he had to do it now. But Tommy wasn't making it easy. That calm face, those steady eyes, they were messing with Eddie's head. What's your deal, kid? Eddie muttered under his breath. You're supposed to be scared. The other guards were moving now, walking fast toward Tommy's spot. They still didn't see the gun clearly, they were too far, but they knew something was wrong. The crowd kept running, clearing a space around Eddie and Tommy. It was like a circle, with the two of them in the middle. Eddie's hands got sweaty. The gun felt slippery in his grip. He didn't want to shoot, not really, but he might have to. If Tommy didn't move, what else could he do? But Tommy wasn't moving. He wasn't scared. He wasn't even breathing hard. He just stood there, tall and still, with that low, steady voice echoing in Eddie's ears. You sure you want to do this? Those words, they weren't a question. They were a warning. A little hint that something big was coming. Eddie didn't get it yet, but he would soon. The air felt thick, like before a storm. The crowd was a blur of noise and motion. The sirens screamed closer. The other guards shouted, Briggs. What's happening? But Tommy didn't answer them. He didn't look away from Eddie. It was just the two of them now, locked in this moment. Eddie with his gun, Tommy with his calm. Who would break first? Eddie's plan was simple: scare the kid, get past the gate, run. But Tommy wasn't scared. He wasn't running. He was standing his ground, and that made Eddie mad and a little scared, too. What was Tommy up to? Why was he so cool under pressure? There was something here, something Eddie was missing. A small revelation, like a crack in a wall, letting a little light through. Tommy wasn't just a guard. He was more. And Eddie? He was about to find out how much more. The tension was building, higher and higher. Eddie's finger twitched on the gun. Tommy's eyes stayed locked on him. The crowd watched, holding their breath. The sirens roared. Something was going to happen, something big. What was it? What was Tommy hiding? Keep your eyes open, because this is just the start of the wild stuff. Eddie Malone stood there, his gun pointed right at Tommy Briggs. His hand shook a little, but he tried to hide it. The crowd was screaming and running, scattering like leaves in the wind. The sirens wailed closer, making Eddie's heart thump even harder. He blinked, confused, staring at Tommy. What's wrong with this guy, he thought. He's supposed to be begging for his life. Eddie had pulled out his gun to scare the young guard to make him jump or cry or run away. That was the plan. But Tommy? He wasn't doing any of that. He wasn't scared at all. Tommy stood tall in his bright red coat, his green eyes locked on Eddie. His face was calm, like he was just waiting for a bus, not facing a gun. A minute ago, he'd said, "You sure you want to do this?" in that low, steady voice. It wasn't loud or shaky, it was strong, like he wasn't afraid. Eddie didn't get it. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The kid was supposed to be a rookie, a nobody, an easy target. But now, Eddie wasn't so sure. Something was off. Something big. Eddie opened his mouth to yell again, "Maybe move, or I'll shoot." But he didn't get the chance. Before he could figure out what to say, Tommy moved. And oh boy, did he move fast. It was like lightning, quick and bright and gone in a flash. 1 second, Eddie was holding the gun, feeling tough. The next second, Tommy's hand shot out, fast as a snake. He grabbed Eddie's arm and twisted it hard. Eddie yelped, surprised, and his fingers let go. The gun flew out of his hand, spinning through the air. It hit the ground with a loud clatter, bouncing on the stone courtyard. The crowd gasped, then cheered. People peeked out from behind benches and trees, clapping their hands. "Wow," a kid shouted. "Did you see that?" They thought it was a show, some fancy guard training trick to impress the tourists. A lady with a camera started taking pictures, snap snap snap. "That was amazing," she said. The other guards, still running over from their posts, slowed down a bit, looking confused. They figured Tommy was just showing off, maybe playing a game. But it wasn't a game. Not even close. Eddie stumbled back, holding his twisted arm. His face was red, and his eyes were wide. What just happened, he thought. His gun was gone, lying on the ground a few feet away. He couldn't believe it. This kid, this quiet, skinny guard, had taken him down in one move. Eddie's plan was falling apart, and fast. He looked at Tommy, ready to yell or run or something. But then Tommy stepped closer, real close, and leaned in. His face was right next to Eddie's, so close Eddie could feel his breath. Tommy's voice was a whisper, soft but sharp, like a secret meant just for Eddie. "You don't recognize me, do you, Malone?" he said. That was it, just a few words, but they hit Eddie like a truck. His face went white as a ghost, pale and scared. His mouth dropped open, but no sound came out. Malone. How did this kid know his last name? Eddie's brain spun like a top. He stared at Tommy, searching his face. Those green eyes, that calm look, did he know this guy? Had he seen him before? Eddie's knees felt wobbly. Something was wrong. Something huge. The crowd kept cheering, thinking it was all fun. "Go, guard, go," a little boy yelled, jumping up and down. But Eddie wasn't cheering. He was stuck, frozen, staring at Tommy. And Tommy? He wasn't smiling or waving to the crowd. He was focused, super focused on Eddie. His eyes didn't blink. His hands didn't shake. He looked like a hunter who just caught his prey. And Eddie? He was starting to feel like the prey. Here's the big reveal, get ready, because this is wild. Tommy wasn't just a royal guard. Nope, not even close. He was an undercover agent, a secret spy working for the police. And not just any agent, he was the agent who'd been hunting Eddie Malone for months. All this time, while Eddie was running and hiding, Tommy was tracking him. Every step Eddie took, every dark alley he slept in, Tommy was there, watching, waiting. He joined the Royal Guards as a cover, a fake job to hide who he really was. That quiet rookie act? That polite yes, sir stuff? It was all a trick, a big, smart trick to catch Eddie. See, Tommy had been on Eddie's trail since the bank robbery. Months ago, Eddie had busted into a bank downtown, grabbed a bag of money, and ran. The police chased him, but he got away, disappearing into the night. They put up posters with his picture, messy hair, sneaky eyes, crooked teeth. "Wanted, Eddie Malone," the posters said. "Dangerous. Call the cops if you see him." Eddie thought he was clever, staying one step ahead. But Tommy? He was cleverer. He didn't chase Eddie with flashing lights or loud sirens. He went quiet, sneaky, blending in. He became a guard, stood at the palace every day, and waited for Eddie to show up. And now, that moment was here. The perfect moment. Eddie had walked right into Tommy's trap, thinking he could scare a kid and run. But Tommy wasn't scared. He wasn't a kid. He was ready. His training kicked in, that fast twist, that quick grab. It was all part of his agent skills. He'd learned how to fight, how to stay calm, how to catch bad guys like Eddie. And today, all that work paid off. Tommy straightened up, still holding Eddie's arm tight. He raised his voice, loud and clear, so everyone could hear. "You're under arrest," he said. The words rang out over the courtyard, strong and sure. The crowd stopped cheering for a second, confused. "Arrest," a man muttered. "What's going on?" The other guards finally got close, their boots stomping on the ground. They saw Eddie's gun lying there, saw Tommy holding him, and their jaws dropped. "Briggs," one of them said, his eyes big. "What's this?" Tommy didn't answer them yet. He reached into his coat smooth and fast and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. They were shiny and metal, clicking as he opened them. Eddie tried to pull away, twisting like a fish on a hook. "No way," he shouted. "Let me go." But Tommy was too strong, too quick. He snapped the cuffs on Eddie's wrists, click, click, and locked them tight. Eddie's arms were stuck now, trapped behind his back. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. He was caught. The crowd went wild again, but this time it was different. They weren't cheering for a show, they were cheering for real. "He got him," a lady yelled, clapping her hands. "That guard's a hero." Kids jumped up and down, pointing at Tommy. "Cool," one shouted. "He's like a superhero." The tourists started taking more pictures, their cameras flashing like crazy. The other guards crowded around, still shocked. "Tommy, you okay?" one asked. "What's happening here?" Eddie's face was a mess, white, then red, then white again. He looked at Tommy, his mouth moving but no words coming out. You, he stammered. He couldn't believe it. This kid, this quiet nobody, was the one who'd been after him all along? Eddie's sneaky eyes darted around, looking for a way out, but there wasn't one. The cuffs were on, the crowd was watching, and the sirens were so loud now they hurt his ears. The cops were almost here. Tommy didn't smile or brag. He just held Eddie's arm, keeping him still. His green eyes were steady, like always. He didn't need to say much, his actions said it all. He'd been playing the rookie guard, standing still every day, letting everyone think he was boring. But it was a cover, a mask. Under that red coat, he was a secret agent with a mission. And that mission? Catch Eddie Malone. Today, he did it. The other guards started to figure it out. "Wait a minute," one said, scratching his head. "Briggs, you're not just a guard." Another one picked up Eddie's gun from the ground, holding it careful like it might bite. "This guy's a crook," he said. "Tommy, how'd you know?" They looked at him different now, not like a quiet kid, but like someone big, someone important. Their jaws stayed dropped, their eyes wide. The crowd pressed closer, buzzing with excitement. "Who's that guy?" a kid asked his mom, pointing at Eddie. "A bad guy," she whispered back. "And that guard caught him." People started clapping again, louder this time. "Good job," a man shouted. "Way to go, guard." They didn't know Tommy's name yet, but they knew he'd done something amazing. Eddie's head hung low. His big plan: scare the kid, run through the gate, get away. It was gone. He'd thought Tommy was weak, an easy mark. But he'd picked the wrong guy. The worst guy. Tommy wasn't just fast or strong, he was smart. He'd been one step ahead the whole time, waiting for Eddie to mess up. And Eddie did. Big time. The sirens stopped as police cars screeched into the courtyard. Doors flew open, and cops jumped out, running over with their hands on their belts. "What's going on?" one yelled. Tommy turned to them, still calm. "I've got Eddie Malone," he said, loud and clear. "He's under arrest." The cops blinked, surprised, then nodded. "Malone," one said. "The bank robber? Good work, kid." They didn't know Tommy was an agent yet, but they'd find out soon. Tommy stepped back as the cops took Eddie, grabbing his cuffed arms. Eddie glared at Tommy, his face twisted with anger. "You tricked me," he spat. "You little," but the cops pulled him away before he could finish. They dragged him toward the cars, his feet kicking at the ground. Eddie's sneaky days were over, all because of Tommy. The crowd cheered louder than ever. "Hero! Hero!" they chanted, clapping and whistling. The other guards patted Tommy's back, still shocked. "Briggs, you're nuts," one said, laughing. "How'd you do that?" Tommy just nodded, keeping quiet like always. But inside, he'd won. His secret was out, and it was a doozy. "Bet you didn't see that coming, huh?" A quiet guard turning into a secret agent, catching a bad guy right in front of everyone? Wild, right? But we're not done yet. The story's got more. Stick around to see what happens next. Eddie Malone was in big trouble now. The cops had him tight, their hands gripping his arms as they dragged him away from the palace gates. His wrists were stuck in shiny metal handcuffs, clicking every time he tried to twist free. Eddie didn't like it, not one bit. He shouted loud, his voice rough and mad. "Let me go," he yelled. "You can't do this." He cursed, too, saying mean words that made a lady in the crowd cover her kids' ears. But the cops didn't care. They kept pulling him toward their cars, their boots stomping on the stone ground. Eddie's face was red, all sweaty and angry. His messy hair flopped around as he jerked his head, looking for a way out. But there wasn't one. The crowd was everywhere, watching him like he was a show. People pointed and whispered, their eyes big and excited. "That's the bad guy," a little boy said, tugging his dad's sleeve. "He's going to jail." The dad nodded, smiling. "Yep, he sure is." Eddie heard it all, and it made him madder. He kicked at the ground, his sneakers scuffing the stones, but the cops just held him tighter. Back by the gate, Tommy Briggs stood tall. The crowd erupted in applause, loud clapping and cheering that filled the air. It was like a thunderstorm of happy noise. People waved their hands, shouting stuff like, "Way to go," and "You're the best." Kids jumped up and down, their balloons bouncing with them. A lady with a big hat clapped so hard her hands turned pink. Everyone loved Tommy now. He'd caught the bad guy, and they couldn't stop cheering. The other guards crowded around Tommy, their red coats bright in the sun. They patted his back, thumping him with big, friendly slaps. "Who are you, man?" one guard said, his voice loud and surprised. He had a bushy beard and wide eyes, like he couldn't believe what just happened. "How'd you pull that off?" another guard asked. He was older, with gray hair peeking out under his hat. They all stared at Tommy, waiting for answers. They'd thought he was just a quiet kid, a rookie who didn't talk much. But now, they knew he was something else. Something big. Tommy didn't say much back. He just smiled, a small, secret smile that didn't show his teeth. It was the kind of smile you'd miss if you weren't looking close. His green eyes sparkled a little, but he kept quiet. He didn't need to explain. He didn't need to brag. What he'd done, twisting Eddie's arm, taking the gun, putting on the cuffs, it said everything. The guards kept talking, asking questions like, "Are you a spy, and did you train for this?" But Tommy just nodded once, letting them figure it out. He was cool like that, calm and steady, even now. The cops shoved Eddie into the back of a police car. The door was open, and they pushed him down onto the seat. "Watch your head," one cop said, but Eddie didn't listen. He banged his head on the door frame and cursed again, louder this time. The cop rolled his eyes and slammed the door shut, bang. Eddie was trapped inside now, his face pressed against the window. He glared out at Tommy, his sneaky eyes narrow and mean. If looks could hurt, Tommy would have been in trouble. But they couldn't, and Eddie was the one in trouble instead. The police car's lights flashed red and blue, spinning fast. Another cop climbed into the front seat and started the engine. It roared to life, loud and growly. "Let's go," he said to his partner. The car rolled forward, tires crunching on the gravel. Eddie pounded his fists on the window, shouting stuff no one could hear through the glass. The crowd watched, some waving bye-bye like it was a game. "Good riddance," an old man yelled, shaking his cane. Everyone laughed, even the kids. Tommy stood by the gate, watching the car pull away. His red coat was still perfect, not a button out of place. His tall black hat sat straight on his head. He didn't cheer or wave like the crowd. He just watched, quiet and still, like always. The other guards stayed close, still buzzing with questions. "Tommy, you gotta tell us," the bearded one said. "How'd you know that guy was bad?" Tommy shrugged a little, that small smile back on his face. "Just doing my job," he said, soft and simple. But it wasn't just his guard job, they all knew that now. Later that day, things got even bigger for Tommy. The palace boss called him in. The boss was a tall man with a fancy suit and a loud voice. His office was inside the palace, up a big staircase with red carpet. The room was huge, walls covered in gold frames, a desk as big as a bed, and windows that looked out over the courtyard. Tommy walked in, his boots clicking on the shiny floor. The boss stood up, his chair creaking. "Briggs," he said, his voice booming. "Come in, sit down." Tommy sat in a chair across from the desk. It was soft, with a cushion that sank under him. He kept his back straight, hands on his knees. The boss looked at him, his eyebrows high. "You're no ordinary guard," he said, pointing a finger. "What you did out there catching that crook, it was amazing." He leaned forward, his tie swinging a little. "You've earned a medal for this, Briggs. A real hero medal." The boss grinned, showing big white teeth. He was proud, really proud, and it showed. Tommy nodded, keeping it simple. "Thank you, sir," he said. His voice was quiet, like always. He didn't jump up or cheer. He didn't say, "I'm the best," or "Look at me." He didn't need to. His actions said it all, grabbing Eddie, stopping the gun, saving the day. The boss kept talking, excited. "We'll have a ceremony," he said. "Big crowd, lots of clapping, maybe a band. You deserve it, Briggs." Tommy just smiled that small smile again. He liked the idea, but he didn't make a fuss. That was Tommy, cool and calm, even when he won. Outside, the crowd was still buzzing. People stayed in the courtyard, talking about what happened. "Did you see that guard?" a mom said to her friend, pushing a stroller. "He was so fast." Her friend nodded, holding a coffee cup. "And brave. That bad guy didn't stand a chance." Kids ran around, pretending to be Tommy, twisting each other's arms and laughing. "You're under arrest," one shouted, giggling. The tourists kept taking pictures, pointing at the gate where it all went down. It was like a party now, everyone happy, everyone safe. Eddie, meanwhile, was on his way to jail. The police car sped through the streets, lights flashing, siren off now. Inside, Eddie sat slumped in the back seat. His hands were stuck in the cuffs, and his head leaned against the window. He wasn't shouting anymore. He was quiet, his sneaky eyes staring at nothing. No more running, no more hiding. The fugitive who thought he could outsmart everyone? He was done. Finished. Caught. Let's think about Eddie for a minute. He'd been so sure of himself. He'd watched Tommy from across the street, smirking, thinking, "This kid's nothing. I'll scare him and run." He'd laughed in his head, picturing Tommy shaking or crying. Eddie thought he was the smart one, the tricky one who'd get away again. But he'd been wrong. So wrong. The guy he'd laughed at, the quiet guard in the red coat, had outsmarted him. Tommy didn't just stop him. He crushed him, fast and clean, right in front of everyone. The police car turned a corner, heading for the jail. It was a big gray building with bars on the windows and a tall fence around it. The cops pulled up to the gate, and it creaked open slow. They drove in, parking near a door with a sign that said "Prison Entrance." The car stopped, and the cops got out. One opened Eddie's door and yanked him up. "Come on, Malone," he said. "Time to go inside." Eddie stumbled out, his legs wobbly. He didn't fight now. He knew it was over. Inside the jail, they took Eddie to a desk. A lady with glasses sat there, writing stuff down. "Name?" she asked, not looking up. "Eddie Malone," a cop said for him. She nodded, scribbling fast. "Bank robbery, huh?" she said. "And now this. You're in big trouble, buddy." Eddie didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, his messy hair hanging in his face. They took his picture click, and his fingerprints, pressing his hands on a pad. Then they led him to a cell, a little room with bars and a hard bed. The door shut clang, and locked tight. That was it. Eddie was stuck. Back at the palace, things were settling down. The crowd started to leave, heading home with big stories to tell. I saw a guard catch a bad guy, a kid told his sister, bouncing as he walked. He was awesome. The guards went back to their posts, still talking about Tommy. He's not just one of us, the old guard said, shaking his head. He's something else. They stood tall again, rifles in hand, but they kept sneaking looks at Tommy. He was their hero now. The sun was getting lower, turning the sky orange and pink. The flags on the palace waved slow in the breeze. Tommy stayed by the gate, his shift almost over. He watched the last of the crowd go, their voices fading. A little girl ran up to him, holding a flower. "This is for you," she said, smiling big. Tommy took it, yellow and bright, and nodded. "Thanks," he said, soft and kind. She ran off, giggling, and Tommy tucked the flower in his coat pocket. It looked funny there, next to the gold buttons, but he liked it. The palace boss came out later, right before Tommy's shift ended. He had a paper in his hand, a fancy one with curly writing. "Briggs," he called, waving it. "This is about your medal. Ceremony's next week." Tommy walked over, his boots quiet on the stones. "Okay, sir," he said. The boss clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a star now, kid," he said. "Everyone's gonna know your name." Tommy just nodded again. He didn't need everyone to know. He was happy just doing his job, the real job, the agent job. Eddie's jail cell was cold and dark. He sat on the bed, staring at the wall. No windows, no way out. He thought about the palace, about his gun, about Tommy. "That kid," he muttered. "That stupid kid." But Tommy wasn't stupid. Eddie knew that now. He'd been tricked, played like a game, and he'd lost. The guy he'd laughed at had won, big time. Eddie wouldn't be running anymore. No more sneaky plans, no more hiding in shadows. Jail was his home now, for a long, long time. The cops back at the station were happy. "We got Malone," one said, high-fiving his buddy. "That guard did our job for us." They wrote reports, typing fast on their computers. "Undercover agent," one added, grinning. Who knew? They called Tommy's boss the police boss, not the palace one, and told him everything. "Your guy's a legend," they said. The police boss laughed. "That's Tommy," he said. "Always quiet, always good." Night came over the palace. The lights turned on, glowing soft and yellow. The courtyard was empty now, just shadows and quiet. Tommy finished his shift and walked inside, hanging up his hat. The other guards waved. "See ya, hero," one called. Tommy waved back, small and quick. He didn't stay to chat. He grabbed his bag and left, stepping out into the cool air. The stars were out, twinkling high above. He looked up, breathing deep. It felt good, really good, to finish what he'd started. Eddie's first night in jail was rough. The bed was hard, and the air smelled funny. He didn't sleep much, just sat there thinking. He'd been so close to getting away, close to winning. But Tommy stopped him. That quiet guard, that kid he'd laughed at, had ruined it all. Eddie punched the wall, his knuckles stinging. "I'll get out," he grumbled. "I'll try again." But deep down, he knew it was a lie. He was caught, and justice was served. How's that feel? Justice served up nice and neat. Eddie, the bad guy who thought he was so smart, locked up tight. Tommy, the quiet hero, getting a medal and a big win. The crowd happy, the palace safe, everything right again. It's like a storybook ending, but real. Tommy didn't need to shout or show off. He just did what he had to, and that was enough. Eddie learned the hard way: don't mess with the quiet ones. They might surprise you. Let's wrap this up with something to think about. What if you were Tommy? Would you stay calm like him? Or what if you were Eddie? Would you try to run again? Justice won today, and it feels good. Real good. So here's the thing, sometimes the person you least expect is the one who changes everything. That's what happened with Tommy Briggs and Eddie Malone. Tommy looked like just another guard, quiet, young, standing there in his red coat like it was no big deal. Nobody thought he was special. Not the tourists snapping pictures, not the other guards chatting by the gate, not even Eddie, the sneaky bad guy with a gun. They all saw Tommy and thought, he's nothing. Just a kid doing a job. But guess what? They were wrong, super wrong. Tommy wasn't just a guard. He had guts, smarts, and a plan. And that changed the whole story. Let's think about Tommy for a minute. He didn't look big or loud or tough. He didn't yell or wave his arms or tell everyone how great he was. He just stood there, day after day, doing his job. His red coat was neat, his black hat was straight, and his green eyes were calm. If you walked by him at the palace, you might not even notice him. He was quiet, like, really quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you think someone's shy or boring. But Tommy wasn't shy. He wasn't boring. He was waiting. Waiting with a secret that nobody saw coming. And Eddie? Oh, Eddie judged Tommy big time. He saw that red uniform and that still face and thought, easy target. This kid's a pushover. Eddie smirked and laughed in his head, sure he'd scare Tommy and run right past him. He judged Tommy by how he looked, young, new, not loud or scary. Eddie thought he was the smart one, the tricky one, the guy who'd win. But he paid a price for that. A big price. Tommy twisted his arm, took his gun, and put cuffs on him faster than you can say oops. Eddie's sneaky plan fell apart, and now he's sitting in jail, thinking about how wrong he was. So what's the lesson here? Maybe it's this: don't judge people by what you see on the outside. Maybe next time you see someone quiet or small or underestimated, you'll stop and wonder, what's their story? What are they hiding? Because the truth is, the biggest surprises come from the people who don't show off. Tommy didn't show off, not once. He didn't need to. He let his actions talk for him, and they shouted loud. Think about your own life for a second. Do you know someone quiet? Maybe a kid at school who doesn't talk much in class. Or a neighbor who keeps to themselves, just waving hi and going inside. What if they're like Tommy? What if they've got guts and smarts and a plan you don't know about? Maybe that shy kid at school is super good at drawing comics, but nobody's seen them yet. Or maybe that neighbor's fixing up an old bike in their garage, turning it into something cool. You don't know until you look closer. You don't know until you ask. Let's imagine a little story to help us think. Picture a girl named Mia. She's in 5th grade, and she's super quiet. She sits in the back of the room, her head down, her brown hair hiding her face. The other kids don't talk to her much. They think she's weird because she doesn't run around at recess or shout answers in class. One day, the teacher asks everyone to bring something special to share, like a toy or a picture. The loud kids bring big stuff, a shiny robot, a loud drum, a sparkly doll. Mia. She brings a little notebook, all beat up and plain. The class giggles when she walks up. What's that? A boy says, laughing. A boring book. Mia doesn't say anything. She just opens it. Inside are drawings, amazing drawings. Dragons with big wings, castles with tall towers, heroes with swords and capes. Every page is full of colors and lines, like a movie on paper. The class goes quiet. Whoa, the boy says, his eyes big. Did you make those? Mia nods, shy but proud. Turns out, she's been drawing for years, practicing every night. She's quiet, but she's got talent, big talent. Nobody saw it coming, just like with Tommy. See? That's what I mean. The quiet ones, the ones you don't notice, they can surprise you. Mia didn't show off. She didn't brag. She just did her thing, and when the time was right, she showed it. Tommy was the same. He didn't tell everyone he was a secret agent. He didn't march around saying, I'm gonna catch a bad guy. He waited, watched, and then bam, he did it. That's guts. That's smarts. That's a plan. Now let's flip it. Think about Eddie. He was loud in his own way, sneaky and bold, pulling out that gun like he owned the place. He thought he was better than Tommy, smarter than everyone. He judged fast and didn't look deeper. And what happened? He lost. Big time. Judging people by their outside, like their clothes or how loud they are, can get you in trouble. Eddie learned that the hard way. He's sitting in a cold jail cell right now, probably wishing he'd thought twice. What if Eddie had stopped to wonder about Tommy? What if he'd looked at those green eyes and thought, this kid's too calm. Maybe he's not just a guard? Maybe he'd have run the other way instead of pulling that gun. But he didn't. He saw the red coat and the young face and decided Tommy was weak. Oops. Big mistake. Judging people can trick you, and Eddie got tricked bad. So here's a fun question for you: could you spot a hero in disguise? Think about it. If you saw Tommy standing there at the palace, all quiet and still, would you guess he was an agent? Would you think, that guy's got a secret? Or would you walk by, snapping a picture, not even looking twice? It's hard to tell sometimes. Heroes don't always wear capes or yell loud. Sometimes they wear red coats and keep their mouths shut. Let's play a game in your head. Picture you're at school, walking down the hall. You see a kid sitting alone by the lockers, reading a book. He's got glasses and a plain shirt, not fancy, not loud. Do you think he's just a regular kid? Or do you wonder, what's he reading? Is he planning something cool? Maybe he's writing a story in his head, or maybe he's the best at fixing computers, but nobody knows yet. You won't know unless you say hi, right? Heroes hide in plain sight all the time. Or how about this? Imagine you're at the park. There's an old lady on a bench, feeding birds with bread crumbs. She's got a gray coat and a slow walk. You might think, oh, she's just old. Nothing special. But what if she's got a story? What if she used to fly planes or climb mountains when she was younger? What if she's got medals hidden in her house, just like Tommy's getting now? You'd never guess unless you sat down and asked her. People surprise you when you give them a chance. Tommy's story makes you think about that. He was a surprise, a big one. Eddie didn't see it, and it cost him. The crowd didn't see it, and it shocked them. Even the other guards didn't see it, and they worked with him every day. That's the cool thing about people. They're like presents wrapped in plain paper. You don't know what's inside until you open them up. And sometimes, the plainest paper hides the best stuff. What about you? Are you a surprise? Maybe you're quiet sometimes, or maybe you don't show off what you're good at. Do you like drawing, like Mia? Or building stuff with blocks? Maybe you're awesome at soccer but don't tell anyone yet. You could be a hero in disguise, just waiting for your moment like Tommy waited for his. You don't have to be loud or big to be amazing. You just have to be you, and that's enough. Let's think about some other heroes who hide. Remember superheroes in comics? Like Clark Kent, he's Superman, but he wears glasses and acts all normal at his job. Nobody guesses he can fly until he rips off his shirt and saves the day. Or what about Spider-Man? Peter Parker's just a kid with a camera, quiet and nerdy, but he's swinging around fighting bad guys when nobody's looking. They're like Tommy, hiding their powers until it's time to shine. Real life's like that, too. Maybe your teacher's a hero in disguise. She's quiet, grading papers, but maybe she ran a big race once or helped build a house for someone poor. Or your bus driver, he's just driving, but maybe he's got stories from when he was a firefighter, saving cats from trees. You don't know until you look. You don't know until you wonder. Eddie didn't wonder. He looked at Tommy and saw a kid, a weak, easy kid. He didn't think deeper. He didn't ask, what's this guy's story? And now he's in jail, locked up tight, because he judged too fast. That's a lesson for us. Judging fast can make you miss the good stuff or the tough stuff, like Tommy's agent skills. Next time you see someone, don't just look at their outside. Look longer. Think harder. You might be surprised. So what do you think? Could you spot a hero in disguise? Could you be one? Maybe you're like Tommy, waiting for your chance to do something big. Or maybe you've already done something cool, and nobody knows yet. Tell me about it. If you're reading this, drop a comment below. Say, I think I could spot a hero, or I've got a secret talent. I'd love to hear your ideas. Stories like Tommy's make your heart race, right? They're wild and fun and full of surprises. If this one got you excited, give it a thumbs up. Let me know you liked it. Let's keep going with this idea. Imagine you're walking home from school tomorrow. You see a kid kicking a can down the street. He's alone, quiet, not bothering anyone. What's his story? Is he just bored? Or is he thinking up a game nobody else knows? Maybe he's the fastest runner in his neighborhood, but he doesn't race with the big kids yet. You could say hi and find out. You could be the one who spots the hero. Or picture this, your cousin comes over, and he's super quiet. He sits on the couch, playing with a little toy car. You might think, he's dull. But what if he's building car tracks in his room at home, making them twist and turn like a roller coaster? What if he's got a plan to make the best track ever? You won't know unless you ask. Quiet people have loud secrets, sometimes cool secrets, like Tommy's. That's what's so awesome about this story. It makes you look at people different. It makes you think, hey, maybe that person's got something amazing inside. Tommy wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He had guts, bravery that showed up when it mattered. He had smarts, brains that tricked Eddie good. And he had a plan, a secret mission that worked perfect. Eddie judged him wrong, and it was game over. So here's a challenge for you. Tomorrow, look around. At school, at home, at the park, wherever you are. Find someone quiet, someone you don't know much about. Wonder about them. Ask yourself, what's their story? What are they hiding? You don't have to talk to them if you're shy, just think about it. Maybe they're a hero waiting to happen. Maybe you are, too. This isn't the end of the fun. I've got more wild tales coming, stories with twists and turns and heroes you won't expect. Stick around for the next one. If Tommy and Eddie got your heart racing, the next story will, too. See you soon, and don't forget, keep your eyes open for the quiet ones. They might just change everything.